a pleasure to be able to be here again as we have come together with only one purpose, and that is to worship God. It is important that when we go to church, believe it or not, that we keep that in mind. That we come here to have an encounter with God. And one of the things that you do before you leave your home, before you come to church, you ask God to speak to you today. To speak to you. God will speak to you because His promises are true. I think that we need to prepare ourselves to go to church, don't you think? Sometimes we just get dressed, we get ready, and we go to church. And to me, the personal preparedness in the morning before we come to church is to ask God to give us the right spirit when we come to church to worship Him, and ask Him to please speak to us. See, if you do that, you can have the worst preacher in the world. I mean, you can even have me here, and God will still speak to you. And God will still speak to you. Because His promises, they will not let you go home empty. He will say something to you through the music. He will say something to you through the sermon. He will speak. Maybe the sermon didn't say anything to you. Maybe the songs didn't say anything to you. And all of a sudden, some little brother will come up to you and just say something to you that you will know that that's why you went to church that day. But God would not let you go empty. One of the things that I love about doing church and preaching is that it does not depend solely upon me. I don't have that load on my shoulders that if I don't do a good job, then you're going to leave out of here empty. I don't believe that. I believe that God is faithful. And if you come to church with that spirit, God is going to make sure that you are filled. Wow, believe it or not, we are into the 6th sermon of the book of Daniel, Game of Thrones. And we're already in chapter 6. Have you been learning about the book of Daniel? Amazing things about the book of Daniel, where I told you where history and the Bible come together. It says there's a story of a little boy. And he went fishing with his father. It was the first time that he went fishing. He was about 6 years old, and he got on that lake, and the water started to get kind of rough, and he began to hold on to the edge of the boat where his knuckles were white already, and he looked at his dad, and he said, Dad, would this water cover my head? And the father said, Yes, your son. Yes, son, this water is deep enough where it will cover your head. The kid, he was really worried now because, when you're in water, right, your biggest worry is that you can't put your feet on the ground, right? You just want to make sure water's fine, it's here. It doesn't matter. It could be up to here. But as long as your feet are firm on the bottom, you're okay. But when they tell you this water will cover you, that begins to worry us. And the kid, he sat there and he looked at the waves and he looked at the water, and then he looked at the father, and as his fist was just clenching on the edge of the boat, and he said, Daddy, does the water cover God's head? And he said, No, son. This water does not cover God's head. His feet are on firm ground no matter what. He said, okay. And he let go. As we go through difficulties in this world, there are so many things that are just over our heads. There are so many things that we can't control. My father has a saying that he let me know when I was a little kid. And it's still with me, and I follow it every single day. And I'll translate it for you. It says, if your problem has a solution, why worry? if it doesn't have a solution, why worry? Does that make sense? If it has a solution, hey, jump on it, get over it, do it. If it doesn't have a solution, why worry? And at the same time, when these problems that are way over our heads, and I want to tell you that the problems that are over our heads, a lot of them come from God, because God needs to get you closer to Him. He needs to bring something to you that you can't handle. You can't handle with your bank account. You can't handle with your abilities. You can't handle with your gifts. You can't handle with anything that you have. You have nothing to bring to the table, and God brings it to you so that then you say, well, I guess I better go to church, or I guess I better go to God, because God will do anything to bring you to Him. In the book of Daniel, chapter 6, it's an amazing story. It's an amazing story. The book of Daniel, you know, written by Daniel. Of course, we've gone over that. But yet we see that in this book of Daniel, chapter 6 is very special. In chapter 6 of Daniel. And you're going to see something in Daniel that you've probably never seen before. I mean, I've shown you some things here that you haven't seen before, because we're going over the book of Daniel in a very special way of getting practical lessons. You know, we're learning the prophecies, and we're learning these years, and we're learning history, but that's good. It's good, and it's important to know, and you can keep that on one side of your mind. But the importance in the book of Daniel is, how does a man of God, how does a woman of God survive in a complete heathen world? And that's what Daniel did. How do you survive? How do you and I survive when everything around us is completely contrary to the scriptures? And how do you and I stay faithful? Because that's what Daniel did. He stayed faithful. And that's the important lesson. That's why from every chapter we get these practical lessons from there that teach us how we as Christians in the age that we live in, that we're being attacked by all kinds of things that sometimes may get us to say, hey, you know, that makes some sense. How do you survive, and how can you stay faithful to God? Chapter 6 is interesting, because it is written like in a third person, and there's really only 2 verses in the whole chapter that Daniel speaks. That there's actually something that Daniel says. Only 2 verses out of the whole chapter. If we go there to Daniel chapter 6, verse 1, want to see where we find ourselves. Chapter 6 is the beginning of a new empire. Remember, we had the Babylonian Empire, then the Medes and the Persians were coming after. And Daniel, we studied last week how he was a very important man in the empire of the Babylonians. And Daniel was faithful to God, and it showed us how those that are faithful to God continue on empire through empire, because those that are faithful to God that will have an eternal empire. And though Nebuchadnezzar died, though Belshazzar was destroyed, though the whole empire of Babylon was gone, Daniel continues on into the next empire. Isn't that interesting? He continues on because of his faithfulness to God, because Cyrus and Darius, Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, all understood that Daniel was first faithful to the God of the Most High. He was not a threat to any king. He was not a threat to the empire, because they recognized that Daniel was only faithful to the God of the Most High. So here we begin. And here begins again in chapter 6, almost as like in chapter 1. Here Daniel's faith has to be proven. Verse 1 says that it pleased Darius, who is the king now of the Medo-Persian Empire, to set over the kingdom. He set 120 satraps to be over the whole kingdom. We're going to go over this chapter. Yes, we do read the Bible in this church. Verse 2, and over these 3 governors, of whom Daniel was one, that the satraps might be. Satraps were like governors that were put over the different provinces. Verse 3, it says, then Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and satraps because of an excellent spirit was in him. And the king gave thought to setting him over the whole team. Now Daniel, he was a big man. He was a big shot. He was in charge because who he was, because of a character, what he represented. And now all of a sudden, the king is not only doing that, he is actually thinking about setting up Daniel as over everything. Over all of these governors. Now that voice gets around, CNN comes out and they're saying, hey, the president is looking at making Daniel, of this high position. People are hearing in CNN and the voice is getting around and people are listening to this. And what happens, these governors are saying, hey, why not me? You know why? Because they didn't have the character, they didn't have the virtues, they didn't have the values that Daniel had. And after all, the king wanted someone next to him who had connections. Connections are important. So the governors and satraps, verse 4, sought to find some charge in Daniel concerning the kingdom. They said, listen, we have to get some sort of gossip on this guy. I was listening to a sermon last night. Actually, Dr. Ben Carlson, he was at Westgate Church last night in Texas, and he was speaking. And he was speaking that now all of a sudden, because he was giving the testimony of his life, that all of a sudden, because of what he is standing for, because he is saying certain things, he said all of a sudden they're trying to dig up dirt about him anywhere and everywhere. And he said, but you know what? I have no worries. There's nothing to bring up. There's nothing to bring up. And he was saying how a while back he was at a place and all of a sudden he received a letter from a lawyer saying that he was behind on child support. Child support. He said, yes, there is this woman who said that she has a child from you. Said, well, that's not true. And then they said, well, you're going to have to prove that by sending blood so we can test it out, take some blood out. He said, I am not giving my blood to anybody. Who knows what you're going to do with that? He said, I know that the only woman I've ever been in my whole life is my wife. So therefore, I'm not sending you blood. I'm not sending you anything. Prove it. And all of a sudden, it died away. You know why it died? And he was mentioning, he says, because you see, people who are famous and people who get around and people who write books and people go all over the place, they travel so much that they figure that somewhere, somehow, they did one or two little things wrong. So therefore, there are certain people who feel that they can throw that upon you, and all of a sudden you can say, where? Maybe. They feel that they can just throw that on you, and you're going to pay some money, you're going to do something to make it disappear, because there might be something out there. You see, when you or a person of God, when you are living according to the principles of God, do you see how important that is? that no matter what they say, no matter what they do, you can stay right, you can stay firm, you can say, you can be faithful because you know that there's nothing out there. It is valuable. It is valuable. It is important to live your life right every single moment of your life, because at moments like that, you're going to need it. Daniel, they said, listen, we got to find some dirt in this guy. And they said, the only problem, but we're not going to find it. They could find no charge or fault because he was faithful, nor was there any error found in him. Then these men said, we will not find any charge against this Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of what? Of his God. So these governors and satraps thought before the king and said to the king, King Darius, live forever. And they said, listen, we can't get to Daniel, but we can get to the king. We can't get to him, but we can get to somebody close to him. So they went to the king, and in my own words here, I'll explain it to you as you see it in the verses, that they go to him and say, King, we have a great idea. We've all come together, and we've come to this conclusion that you're so great that you need to be worshipped. Oh, the king is like, oh, you think so? Yeah. I mean, who's bigger than you? I mean, they appeal to the ego of this king, and he's going, worship? That sounds pretty good. To be worshipped. Yeah, and we're gonna put a law. I mean, just for 30 days, man. Just for 30 days. And in those 30 days, no one can worship anything else, bow before anybody else, just before you. Oh, man, his ego was flying high. He forgot about anything, and he forgot about everything. And he's going, imagine that, people worshiping me as if I was God. And he goes, oh, man, that's a good idea. Let's do it. We go to verse 9. It says, therefore the king signed the decree. Now, I want you to remember this verse, because we're going to go back to these things. I don't want to waste time now. We're going to go back to these things. But I want you to remember these things. The king signed it. Now, when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, what did he do? He went home. And in his upper room with his windows open toward Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks to God, before his God, as was his custom since early days. His life is in jeopardy, not the mortgage, not the car payment. His life is in jeopardy, and he goes home. And he prays. Martin Luther said in his book, I pray 1 hour each day, except when I have a lot of things to do and a lot of problems. Then I pray 2 hours. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before God. They were watching him. Ain't no telescope out there. Hey, watch him. You know this guy's going to pray. You know he's going to pray. And they went before the king and spoke concerning the king's decree. Have you not signed the decree? Hey, didn't you sign the decree that this was going to happen? And whoever did it, they were going to be thrown into a big pit where there's lions, and the lions are going to eat them up. That's it. They had it. They were going to do away with Daniel. And all of a sudden, it hit the king. Oh, what did I do? He forgot about Daniel's faithfulness. He forgot about how Daniel was. He forgot all about that. He saw how his ego ate him up. But the Medes and the Persians, they had a custom that once the king signed a law, it was done. You could not revoke it. You could not change it. And the king Verse 13 says, they answered and said before the king, O Daniel, he is one of the captives of Judah. You know what he's doing. Verse 14, as the king, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with himself, and he set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. In other words, he went and said, can we change it? And the king was going crazy. People, you have to be careful of the things that you say or the things that you do. We have to be more thoughtful of the things that we sign, the things that we do, the deals that we make, the things that we do, because if we do it too quickly and we don't think about the results of these things, and what is it that's going to happen? There are things you can't back away from. There are things you can't just put aside. There are things you just can't change. That once you've made that decision, that's the way it's going to go. And there's going to be definite results from that. And the king, he tried, he talked, he did everything he could. He got together with his cabinet. He got together with other leaders. Can we change this? They say, no, you can't. If you change this, you're going to have to change the whole custom of the Medes and the Persians. Then that means anybody can change anything anytime they want. You got to stay with this. The man was heartbroken because he was not only going to kill one of his friends because of his ego, because of his irresponsible decision, but he was going to lose one of the most important persons in his kingdom. Then his approach, the king said to the king, know, O king, that it is the laws of the Medes of the Persians. Let's jump to verse 16. So the king gave the command, and they brought Daniel. They brought Daniel and cast him into the land of lions. But the king spoke, saying to Daniel, your God whom you serve continually, he will what? He will deliver you. Remember this. The king says he will deliver you. These men said, if we do this, we know that Daniel is going to do this. They knew it. And then the king said, Daniel, if you do this, I know that your God will do this. Stone was put. Verse 18, the king fasted. That means he didn't eat. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. Then the next morning, verse 20, then the king came to the den. He cried out with lamentation voice to Daniel and spoke, saying, O Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, as your God whom you serve continually been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and cut the lion's mouth so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also, king, I have done no wrong before you. And these are the only two verses that Daniel speaks in this whole chapter. Now the king was exceedingly glad for him. And they took Daniel out of there. And the king went and took all those other guys who did because of what they did, and he threw them and their families into the den of lions. And the story goes that the lions did not even wait for them to get to the bottom before they were eaten up. As we go through this, there are very practical lessons that we learn from this. And as we see this, we see that God, that these men, they could not get to Daniel. They cannot get to Daniel. They cannot get to anyone else. They cannot get to him. They cannot find anything wrong with him. And the first lesson that I learned when I read this chapter is be aware of ricochet targets. Remember that. Be aware of ricochet targets. Be aware of the people that are around you, because sometimes the devil can't get to you, but he can get to those that are around you. They couldn't get to Daniel. But the king was very close to Daniel. And the king was not close to God. So then they were able to get to Daniel through the king. You have to be careful of your friends, people. You have to be careful of those who hang around you. You know, the other day I was watching something really quick. I really don't sit down to watch these programs, but it was something we were watching, and all of a sudden, it was at a gas station. These cops, they stopped this car. This girl, she was with a guy. They take the guy down. They cuff him. They do all this, and they find all these drugs inside this car. And here's this girl, of course, she says she didn't know anything about it. But it could be that she actually didn't. Be careful of who your friends are. Be careful of the people you hang around. Because sometimes you might be strong, and sometimes the devil can't get to you, straight to you, but he'll find somebody who they can get to. I remember a long time ago as I was reading this and thinking of it, the picture came to my mind. I was watching a movie. I don't remember what the name of it was. I must have been 14, 15 years old or whatever. And one of these old army movies. And these guys hid inside a cave. Hid inside a cave. And there were soldiers outside from far away. And these guys, they were in the cave. You couldn't get to them because if you tried to get to the mouth of the cave, they would shoot you. So the guys who were out there says, how do we get these guys? The guy said, the cave is of rock, right? I said, yeah, the cave is of rock. He goes, bro, just shoot into the cave. The bullets will ricochet all over the place and they'll hit somebody. Could you imagine that? They were sitting in there. All they would hear is a shot. Then pew, 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 drop. How do you get away from that? Be careful that in your life you don't put yourself into situations that although you yourself are faithful, you are still getting hit from other places because of the people that are around you. Those around you can be as dangerous as the devil himself. As the devil himself. As I was growing up right here in South Florida, and the night that the Lord changed my life, and the night that the Lord called me, that morning, I got on the phone and I called my friends. I lived in Boca, and I called my friends and I said, listen, I can't hang around with you anymore. I have decided to change my life. Well, can't you come and just hang out? We're going to do this stuff. Yeah, but we didn't just hang out. There were a lot of things that came along with hanging out. And I said, no, I can't. People don't like it. Remember also that the people around you, people don't like it when you are contrary, when you live contrary to what they believe and God blesses you. People don't like that. People want you to be like them. People want to take you down with them. And when they see that you are faithful to God, they do not wish good upon you. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, bad company ruins good morals. Bad company ruins good morals. And I'm one that I hang out with anybody and everybody, and I am friends with people whether they come to church or don't come to church or whatever, as long as they respect what I believe. The minute they start messing with me, yo, Pastor, why don't you have a little beer? I said, right there, they're not respecting me. I don't play like that. And I respect anybody else, what they believe, how they live, but they have to respect mine. That way, they'll have my company around them as long as they want it. But bad company brings down your morals. Brings down your morals. A second lesson that I learned from this is predictable obedience. Predictable obedience. Think about that. Although these men were against Daniel, they predicted his obedience. They predicted his obedience. They say, listen, he's not going to do anything wrong. If you're going to catch him, you're going to have to catch him with obedience. Predictable obedience. Wouldn't it be good if everyone around us actually predicted our obedience? Actually, we're able to say, no, don't even try. He don't go that way. Don't even offer her that. She will not be part of that. Predictable obedience. Where people around us can be sure. Can be sure of that. Can be sure that we're not going to fall. Daniel's enemies predicted his obedience. Imagine if people around us knew that. No, they will not fall for that. No, do not have alcohol at this place because they're not going to drink anything. Don't even waste your time offering them. They won't. Don't invite them to this place because they will not go. They will leave. They will rather be home by themselves instead of going. See, that's the way the world needs to see us. They need to see us as close people, as loving people, but people with high principles, that there are certain lines where everyone around us knows that we just won't cross. That we just won't cross. How many times they say, yeah, she goes to church, she's Christian, but she's cool. That's all right. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I know, they go to church and, but don't worry about it. She's cool. She's cool means that you have no borderlines. You have nothing. You do whatever. You do whatever. There's nothing that you really stand for. But even his enemies predicted his faithfulness. But this hit me for the first time when I was studying it this week. That not only did his enemies predict Daniel's faithfulness, but the king predicted Daniel's God faithfulness. They predicted his faithfulness. But the king said, Daniel, I know your God will save you. Isn't that incredible? These guys say, we know that Daniel is going to be faithful no matter what. And the king says, but I also know that his God will be faithful no matter what. Isn't that incredible? I mean, I read that, blew me out. I said, whoa, I've never seen this. Two groups being predictable. One was predictable of his faithfulness, and the other one predictable of the faithfulness of his God. Oh, man. Wouldn't it be wonderful if people were saying about you, they're going through hell right now, but let me tell you something. That person has a relationship with God that his God will bring them through. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about them. Don't worry about them. Their God will bring them through. See, this is Daniel living within the Medes and the Persians. Daniel represents you and I living in this world here today. Can you see it? Can you see this? This is what we need to see. Not just numbers, not just dates in the book of Daniel. We need to see that. We are Daniel here today. And Daniel's teaching us how to live, how to be faithful, and not how to be some sorry poor guy. He's saying, no, how to be, and if you're that way, God will put you in high places. Predictable obedience. That's the kind of obedience we need to have. Predictable obedience. People will know. It's no surprise. People will know that we're not going back. People will know we don't eat of that. We don't drink of that. People will know we don't go into those places. People will know that we don't do those things. It is predictable. They know it. They know it. And if we're ever in trouble, we also know, people also know that we have a God who can deliver us. Number 3, the third lesson I learned from this chapter is that blind faith is only blind to the one who's never been there before. Blind faith is only blind faith to the one who's never been there before. We've been reading Daniel. We've been going over every chapter from chapter 1 on. Had Daniel been there before? He'd been there before. And so, was his faith blind faith? It wasn't blind faith. Now, to those guys, it was blind faith. But blind faith is only blind faith to those who have never been there before. In verse 10 that we read, here's a decree. A decree is made for the king for Daniel to die. His faith is being questioned. You know, have you ever been at your job where your faith is being questioned, where you have to compromise what you believe, and all of a sudden, you know, hey, I'm going to knock on some doors. Hey, I'm going to get to the bottom of this, and you start going to so-and-so because I know I got connections. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? You know, and we go all crazy, and we start talking to people, and we start going. Daniel, he heard it. He went home, and he prayed. Psalms 46:10, be still and know that I am God. He said, hey, this is no surprise to God. God knows about it. My trust is in the Lord. Psalm 46, read the whole psalm when you get home. Beautiful psalm. Psalm 46. It's about deliverance. It's about God's protection. Be still and know that I am God. It's interesting that Daniel, in the midst of trouble, seeks the stillness of God. Stillness of God. A long, long time ago, even before I was born, people there were no refrigerators. And people kept ice in what they called ice houses. Now, the walls were really thick. And if there were lakes close by that froze, they would go cut out pieces of ice from the lakes, and they would bring them and store them in these houses to be able to keep them cold. And then they would take sawdust to actually hold the ice from melting, and they would cover them with sawdust. And that ice sometimes lasted all winter. There was a man that once he was preparing his ice house and putting his ice in there and doing all these and filling it up with sawdust, he lost his watch. He lost his watch. And he went back in and he looked for his watch hours and hours, and he couldn't find his watch. He called the people who worked for him, listen, find my watch, go in there. They looked and looked and looked, and they could not find his watch. They finally gave up completely. And the man's son, small little boy, He went inside the ice house. And about 15 minutes later, he came out with the watch. He said, how'd you do it? We've been looking for hours and hours, all these people looking. He said, well, Dad, I just walked in there and I laid on the sawdust. And I was real quiet. And I waited for the tick. And I listened for the tick of the watch. And I found it. You know, sometimes in our lives, we make so much noise about our problems that we can't hear God. It's not that God isn't talking to us, it's that we're not listening. Blind faith is only blind to ones who never been there before. Point number 4 that I learned from this chapter is that coming to the point that your life speaks without words. It was interesting to me that in the book of Daniel, Daniel's not talking. It just talks about what is going on, what is happening. And all of a sudden, Daniel only speaks in 2 verses of this whole chapter. But you see, he didn't need to speak. These men who were trying to kill him, they're the ones speaking for him. The king is the one speaking for him. All these people are speaking for Daniel. Daniel doesn't need to say a word. These guys are saying, listen, Daniel is so straight. He is straight like an arrow. We're not going to catch him with anything. We're going to have to go, and get him this way. They're the ones talking in the chapter. They're the ones saying how faithful Daniel is. And then the king is also saying how faithful Daniel is and how great his God is. Someone told me a saying a long time ago, and I'll remember it forever. It says, we constantly preach, and only when necessary we use words. Only when necessary. See, if you have to use too many words about who you are and what you believe, it's probably because you're not. If you have to keep explaining yourself, it's probably because your life is contrary to what you say. When you live the life of a Christian, when you carry it out, you don't have to constantly be defending yourself. You don't constantly have to be, well, let me explain to you what I believe. Well, I've known you for 15 years. Wow, that's new. Never even thought you knew that. When you need to constantly be explaining to people what you believe and what you stand for, check yourself, because it might be because you're not living it. In this whole chapter, Daniel doesn't speak except in 2 chapters to say, yes, King, my God took care of me because I have been faithful to him. I have been faithful to you. That's it. He just glorifies. When I see that, all I see is praising. That's all Daniel does. He's praising. He's praising, and he's probably saying this, laying back on that cave with 2 lions around him. They're hugging him like this, messing with their fur. King probably opened that thing, and the lions were, on their back with their legs up, and he was tickling them, Then he opens the door. Oh, hey, King, yeah, how you doing? Yeah, I'm all right, man. When our life speaks, our mouth doesn't need to speak. We don't need to be that vocal about what we believe when we live it. I want you to know, people, that the world has never seen God. Do you know that? the Christ and the God that we talk about, the world has never seen it. But they see you and I. The closest thing that the world will ever get to God is you and me. Is you and me. Why do people argue with atheists? I never argue with an atheist about whether God exists or not. Don't argue with an atheist. You see them all the time. Don't argue with an atheist. Just live your life as a Christian person. Our lives are the biggest example that God exists. The way our families behave, the way we are, the way we carry them out, no matter what, people will see that living the life of a Christian is much better. And every which way you put it. We always preach. Okay, remember that. You will always preach. You will always preach. People say, well, I don't preach anything, I just keep quiet. You're preaching. You're preaching. You're preaching by the way you dress. You're preaching by the way you talk. You're preaching by the way you act. Now, which sermon you're preaching, I don't know. But you're preaching. But you're preaching. We are walking sermons no matter where we go. And you really don't have to say much to preach a lot. Number 5 is when the right decisions bring bad results. Did you know that good decisions a lot of times bring bad results? You didn't study for a test? You decided to not cheat? You got the smartest kids sitting next to you. He's got that test like way out there. He's kicking back and the test is like way out there. Whoa! D, C, A, B. He's an A student. It's all there. Boom, look at that. Whoa, what a miracle. Thank you, Lord. I knew you'd take care of me. If you decide to not look, if you decide to do the right thing, you can be 100% sure that you're going to get an F. Right? Good decisions do not bring good immediate results. But in the long run, it'll make you a man or woman of God with great values. Bad decisions bring great immediate results. Decide, whoa, A, B, C, boom, D. Ooh, boom, is that an A or a B? Oh, it's an A. Okay, boom. Get back your grade, 100%. Wow. God, I didn't even study. In the long run, it turns you into a cheater, and you will learn to cheat at everything that you do. So you'll finally find yourself in a little locked up room all by yourself, with little bars in front. See, sometimes we want things so immediate. We want things so quick. But Daniel's decision, yes, took him to the lion's den. But today we're reading about Daniel, aren't we? Today we're reading about Daniel. We're not reading anything about those guys who lied. We're not reading anything about them. We're reading about Daniel. As you live your life today, what kind of legacy are you going to leave for your children? It is not so much about what people say when here alive, but if Jesus doesn't come and we pass away, what will people say about you? on how you lived your life and how faithful you were. If you were so-so and you believe one thing one day and another day another, you know, what is the legacy that you and I are leaving behind for our children? Will our children, we're all grandchildren, be able to say, my grandfather stood for this, he believed in this, he went forward, and he was always straight. We'll always say, yeah, my grandfather, he was real loving and everything, you know, and he loved us a lot, but you don't leave anything for anyone to hang on to. Number 6, and last lesson that I see from here, I'm sure you can study and learn many more. When you fear God, you don't need to fear man. The problem is that we fear man and don't fear God. We fear the police, but we don't fear God. We fear the IRS, but we don't fear God. We fear all kinds of people. We are completely contrary to Daniel. We fear everything around us except God. Turn that around. Because when you fear God, you don't need to fear anything. When you fear God, you will live your life correctly because He's God. You will say the right things because He's God. You will live your morals will be straight. Your morals with whoever you are, with your boyfriend, with your girlfriend, with your wife, with your husband, with your friends around. You will guard your morals. You have lines that you do not cross. Why? Because you fear God. When you fear God, you don't have to worry about an AIDS result. When you fear God, you don't have to worry about somebody calling and saying something about you that nobody knows about. When you fear God, you don't need to fear man. Live constantly in the presence of God. Know the reality of the existence of God. That God is not a theory. He's not a doctrine. He's not a belief. That He is a person, real, who's at your side at every single moment. And because you fear Him, you become a person of character. You don't let people sway you from side to side because you fear God, and God's character is your character, and you stand on something. When you stand on something, people will respect you for that. People will respect you. And not only they will respect you, they will know your God. They will respect you and they will respect your God. And they will know that your God will be faithful to you no matter what. Being close to God. Being close to God is the most important choice that we can make today in our lives, because only close to God is our character built to the way God wants it to be built. Not away from Him, but close to Him. It's not about making changes. It's about just coming close to God. If you find that you're not living that life, you're not being everything that God wants you to be, my suggestion to you today is don't make any changes. You say, Pastor, you're crazy. Why don't you make any changes? That's right. Don't make any changes. Don't say, oh, I got to create this change. Just come close to God. Come close to Him. And just come to Him. And look for Him every day. And build that relationship with God. And let Him build His character upon you. Don't you decide what your character should be and try to change that, because you probably won't make it. Just draw close to God. And say, God, I've been far from you. I've been doing whatever I want. I've been doing what others tell me to do. I've been trying to make all these people happy. I fear losing friends. I fear losing the person that I love. I fear that if I do these things, I'm going to lose everything. I fear this, but I want to fear you. I want to take that fear that I have for everything around me and transfer that fear to you. To you. And I know that if I do that, I will not fear anything else anymore. As we get close to God, may our prayer today will be to just draw close to Him, so that character that Daniel had, will become our character. And we'll become a modern day Daniel in this world that we live in today. Listen to this song.
Draw me
Dear Heavenly Father, as we come before your presence today, Lord, we live in this world. Help us to be a modern day Daniel. Help us to be people of character. People who fear you instead of fearing those around us. That everywhere we go, we preach by our actions because of what we stand for. We know that you're coming soon and that you are preparing a people to be ready for that coming. But you're not only preparing a people for that coming, you are preparing a people to preach this great message in a powerful way, in a bigger way than it's ever been preached before. And we want to be part of those who bring your name and your power to anybody and everybody who you want saved. And that they, Lord, we may bring our family members, our cousins, our neighbors, our aunts and uncles to your feet. Through our example and through the message that you have given us. We ask all this in the name of Jesus.